Hi everyone, I'm Jenny and today we're going to have a look at how to maintain your AK1 and AK2 tufting machines. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you stay up to date for everything tufting related, and maybe you also want to follow us on Instagram to see a bit more behind the scenes and maybe get a chance to win something. Okay, let's start with a quick overview on what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to have a look at how you should handle and store your machine in general, and also the regular maintenance that you do before or after you tuft, as well as the regular oiling you should do on your tufting machine. Okay, let's talk about storing your tufting machines. We prefer two options, or we do two options in the studio. We either store them on this wall rack here, or we store them in these crates where you can fit in the pulp that the machine comes with perfectly, and everything is in a nice and neat space. The pulp with which the machine comes is a very nice place to store it. The very cool thing is that it fits exactly into these nice crates, and no matter how you store your machine, you want to make sure the cable is not getting pushed into a direction. You want to make sure it's not getting squeezed together or like stuck underneath something or squished together somewhere, because if you keep on pushing your cable into direction where it some kind of doesn't want to go, you're gonna always make a little dent on that part, and at one point the wire might just break. This will then lead to a loose contact so whenever you move, it's either making a contact or not, and your tufting machine randomly turns on and off all the time, which makes it obviously very annoying to tuft, and I guess no one wants that. So make sure the cable is nicely rolled up and not squished together just somewhere. Also, you want to make sure the same things for the cables on the motor, because they're super thin and fragile, and we don't want to break them as well, because obviously if we lose the connection to the motor, that's not going to work out for us when we want to tuft. The last thing you want to take care of when you store your machine is the sensor. I show you this here. The sensor, these two thin metal plates back here, we want to make sure they're not getting tangled up in something or bent over. So just don't store your tufting machine on a pile of yarn or something. Just have a nice and neat space for your tufting machine where it can sleep nice and comfy, basically, like you in your bed. Let's talk about maintenance that you do before or after every time you tuft. I like doing it just after I tufted or I finish my piece, because when I want to start a new piece, I usually don't want to maintain my tufting machine first. I want to start right away. So let's have a look at that. So when you finish tufting your piece, or after the whole day tufting and you want to go home in the evening, you realize your machine is full of these super small fibers that are all over the place, also in your studio. And we want to get rid of these after every time we finish tufting. And why is that? So these fibers are super small and they get into the moving blocks. So you have to imagine these blocks here, the two that are moving on the four rails, they need as little friction as possible. So if these super tiny fluffs get underneath here, it will build up friction, and at one point, if you never clean your machine, it will just be stuck there. So there are two options to clean your machines. You can do it with brushes and just make sure all the fibers are off the machine. Or how I like to do it is with the air compressor, because we have compressed air in the studio, so this is much easier. So I just give it a good blow so everything is off the machine. So when you clean your machine, it should really look like new, like no fluffs on it, just nice and clean as it came out of the box. So the big question is always, how often do I have to oil my machine? And there's no general answer to this. I cannot say, you have to do it every 2 weeks. I mean, maybe you're just tufting once a week, or maybe you're tufting every day. How often you have to do it also depends on what yarns you use, what's your speed setting on the tufting machine, how you handle your tufting machine, and so on. So you need to get a feeling for it, basically, and you will get a feeling for it. There will be a point where your machine starts to sound louder, and you will realize there is more friction going on in the moving part. So that's the latest point where you should oil your machine. So where do we oil the machines? What points need to be oiled? So you want to oil the machine on the 4 ball points between the bearing, and also on the 4 rails where the sliding blocks are moving on. What I see very often on social media, YouTube, or whatever, is that people use sewing machine to oil their tufting machines. Don't do that. Sewing machine is used that the gears of the sewing machine are gripping better into each other. So it's making things grip nice. But that's the opposite of what we want. We want to make things like slide. We want to make them moving freely and without any friction. And that's the opposite of what sewing machine oil does. Not every oil is a lubricant. So we do now sell this tufting machine oil in our shop, and it's especially made for tufting machines, and that it's making things move. So use tufting machine oil or knitting machine oil that's also made to make things moving. So I just apply a little tiny drop to each ball joint, as well as on each rail. And then I just let it run for a moment. So the oil has now moved to all the places where it should go. If you have put too much oil on it and your machine is greasy, oily, you can just use a wipe or a cloth and get rid of the excess oil. Just make sure you don't take off all the oil. You don't want to clean it off. And again, to talk about the frequency, how often you do that, you get a feeling for it, but you can also not really over-oil a machine. Of course, do not dunk it in a bucket of oil. We don't want that. But if you give it a tiny drop every now and then, nothing bad can happen. So let's quickly sum up on what we talked about. Store your machine nice and neatly somewhere safe. Don't bend over your cables. Make it fluff-free after every time you tuft it, and oil it on the 8 points every now and then. I think that's it for today. If you have more questions about maintaining your AK1 or AK2 tufting machine, simply leave a comment below. And otherwise, happy tufting and see you soon. Bye!